For 20 seconds, listen to this. The white colt stood on two legs, hooves cutting the hot air, ropes singing tight, and the crowd held its breath. A man's voice rose over the dust, mine saying, "Easy boy," though my hands shook. Someone laughed, someone bet I would fail, and the auction bell hovered like a promise I could not afford. If I stepped forward, I risked everything left with my name. If I stepped back, I lost something I did not yet understand. The sun sat hard on the wooden rails, and the auction ground smelled of sweat and old rope. Men leaned on fences, coins clicked, and the colt, milk white with a silver mane, reared again. "He's trouble," the handler muttered. He was born stubborn. I said nothing. I only watched the shine of fear in the animal's eyes and felt a pull inside my chest, as if the colt had reached a line to me that no one else could see. "Start him at 50, the auctioneer called, rolling the number like thunder. "Strong bones, fast legs, hard to match." The crowd hummed. A rancher near the gate lifted his chin. 60, he said, flat and bored like he bought colts with his breakfast. I kept my hat low. My sister had warned me not to come, not after last year when the feed turned dear and the fields gave nothing back. Still I stood there, and the colt's breath came white and fast, and my mouth spoke before my sense did. 70. Heads turned. I tasted dust. The rancher's smile bent sharp. 80. The colt struck the rail with a hollow ring, and somebody behind me whispered, "He'll break his own legs." I cleared my throat. 90. The number felt like a hot stone. The auctioneer grinned because tension paid him better than coin. "Why him?" the handler asked under his breath. I answered, "Because he did not give up." The rancher lifted 2 fingers. 100. A small sound left the crowd, the kind that said this game had become real. I looked at the colt again. His ears twitched toward me. It was a small thing, but it felt like a door opened 1 inch in a dark room. 110, I said, quiet but sure. The rancher paused, eyes on me, then on the colt, who watched me back. He scratched his jaw, waved off the dust, and smiled without warmth. "Let the fool have his lesson," he said to no one at all. The bell waited. My heart did the same. The gavel fell like thunder, and the white colt was mine. The sound cut through the crowd, leaving behind a strange hush. Some men clapped their hands to their knees, muttering that I had lost my mind. Others tipped their hats as if they had just seen something they could not name. My heart was loud in my chest, and my palms stung from gripping the rail too tight. The colt reared again, rope burning against the handler's hands, and for a moment I wondered if I had not only bought him but bought my own ruin. The rancher I had outbid leaned closer, his smile sharp as broken glass. "He'll eat your money in hay," he said, voice low enough to be heard only by me. "And your pride too." I did not answer. I touched the brim of my hat and turned my eyes back to the colt. His chest heaved, his nostrils flared, and yet his gaze cut to me, searching, wild but not blind. I swallowed hard. "Easy boy," I whispered, though I knew he could not hear me above the noise. Still, I spoke because my father had once told me words carried weight, even when the wind seemed to steal them. Naomi, my sister, had pushed her way through the onlookers. Her cheeks were pale, and her hands clutched the fence as if to hold herself upright. "Caleb," she hissed, "what have you done? We can't afford another mouth, let alone a wild one." I could not look at her, not yet. The choice had been made, and explaining it felt smaller than standing firm. The handler passed me the rope. It burned rough against my skin as the colt pulled, strong as a storm. My boots dug into the dirt, and I breathed slow, steady breaths. "I've got you," I said under my breath, though it felt more like I was saying it to myself. The crowd leaned closer, curious whether I would be dragged into the dust or stand my ground. The colt jerked, muscles tense as a bowstring, but I did not pull back hard. I gave slack, then took it gently again, the way my father once taught me. "Let him fight," the handler said with a laugh. "He'll break you quick." I shook my head. "Not today." Step by step, the colt stilled, only a little, only enough for the rope to feel less like a chain and more like a thread. A hush spread across the men around us, the kind that said something fragile had just begun. The rope trembled between us, tight as a drawn wire, and my arms ached from holding steady. The colt's hooves struck the ground with angry thuds, sending small clouds of dust into the air. My breath came slow, each one measured, each one heavier than the last. I whispered again, "Easy boy," though my lips felt dry, my throat rough. His ears flicked back, then forward, restless as a wind vane caught between storms. He did not calm, not fully, but he did not bolt either. That was enough for now. Naomi's voice cut across the rail, sharper than the rope in my hands. "This is madness, Caleb. You've tied yourself to trouble." Her eyes were bright, not only with anger but fear. I didn't answer her, not yet. I couldn't. Every part of me was bent toward the Colt, toward holding the line without breaking him or myself. The handlers stood back now, watching with folded arms, their faces set in doubt. One of them chuckled low. "Give it an hour, he'll drag him into the dirt." The other shook his head. "Or break his spirit like all the rest." Their words slid past me, faint as buzzing flies. A shadow stretched across the ground, and I knew without looking who it was. Judah Blackwell stood at the fence, his broad shoulders filling the gap between two posts. His smile was small, cruel, the kind a man wears when he sees someone step into a trap. "Enjoy him while you can, Armstrong," he said. "That horse has more fight than your land has feed. You'll see soon enough." I gripped the rope tighter, the fibers biting into my palm. I wanted to answer, but silence felt stronger. The Colt tugged again, reared half up, then landed with a grunt. My boots slid back in the dirt, but I did not fall. I only pulled, gentle, guiding, letting the storm blow itself thin. For a moment, the Colt's eyes locked on mine. They were wide, bright, full of fire, but in them I saw not only rage. Something else lived there, faint but real, a question maybe. My chest tightened as if some part of me recognized the same fight. I lowered my head a little, softening my voice. "We'll walk through this, you and me." He snorted, pawed at the earth, and though his muscles still shook with fury, his steps eased a fraction. The crowd murmured low, restless, sensing the turn, not sure yet whether to laugh or hold their tongues. And in that tense silence, I knew the real struggle had only just begun. The Colt lunged sideways, the rope snapping tight enough to burn my hands raw. I held fast, digging my heels deep into the dirt until my boots carved lines in the ground. The crowd gasped, a ripple of sound rising like wind through dry grass. A boy near the fence shouted, "He'll tear loose," but I shook my head, sweat sliding down my temple. "Not today," I muttered, steadying my breath, steadying my grip. The Colt's sides heaved, his chest shining with sweat, but there was something in the way his ears turned back toward me that made me hold on with more patience than strength. "Caleb," Naomi called again, her voice trembling now, softer than before. "This isn't pride anymore, it's risk. We've lost enough." I closed my eyes for a heartbeat, remembering empty nights staring at the broken corral where my herd once stood. That memory had been heavier than hunger. I opened my eyes and fixed them on the Colt. "I'm not letting him go," I said low, barely loud enough for her to hear. She pressed her lips tight, her fingers white on the rail, but she said no more. The handlers shifted, uneasy, as the auctioneer stepped closer with a grin that glowed under the heat. "Fine show, Armstrong. You've given us more drama than the cattle ever could." His words carried the smugness of a man who fed off spectacle, but behind his smile was doubt, too. Few believed the Colt could be let out of the pen without chaos. Blackwell's laugh rolled through the silence. "Mark my words, before sundown, that horse will remind you why he belonged to me." I ignored him. Instead, I loosened the rope just a touch, letting it hang with weight but not pain. The Colt blinked, his chest rising sharp, his head jerking once more, but then he stilled, only slightly, only long enough to test the air between us. I took a slow step forward. Dust stirred around my boots and every eye in the yard followed. The Colt stamped, snorted, but he did not retreat. His breath puffed white in the hot sun and mine matched it, rough and deep. A hush stretched across the corral as if all of us, man and beast, had agreed to wait for the next move. And then, without warning, he lowered his head, just an inch, just enough to break the wall of pure defiance. My chest tightened. "That's it, boy," I whispered, more prayer than command. It was a small shift, almost nothing at all, but I felt it as the first stone moved in a mountain that might one day fall. The hush over the corral deepened until even the flies seemed to pause in the air. The Colt's head stayed lowered, his breath sharp and ragged, but that single inch felt like a door opening. I let the rope ease in my hands, not slack enough for him to bolt, not tight enough to choke. My father's voice echoed in memory, calm and certain. "Don't break a horse's fire, Caleb. Guide it. Let him think he chose you." I swallowed the lump in my throat and whispered again, "Easy now. One step, that's all." He stamped once, dust spraying up, and the men near the fence leaned back. A nervous laugh broke from someone, quickly hushed by the weight of what was unfolding. Slowly I shifted my boots, tugging the rope gentle but firm. The Colt resisted, muscles bunched like coiled rope, then jerked his head high again. For a heartbeat I thought it was over. My arms strained, shoulders screaming. But then, with a sudden shiver that ran from his mane down to his legs, he stepped, just one step, toward me. The sound of his hoof striking dirt echoed louder in my ears than the auctioneer's bell. Naomi gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Caleb, she whispered, and for the first time that day, her voice carried something more than fear, it carried awe. Blackwell's face darkened, the smile falling from his lips. Luck, he muttered, though the words sounded thin, brittle, like a lie he told himself to swallow defeat. I met his stare only for a second, long enough to see the promise of vengeance burn in his eyes, before turning back to the Colt. I could not waste strength on him. Not now. Again, boy, I murmured, steady as stone, giving the faintest pull. The Colt blew out a hard breath, his flanks heaving, and then his hoof struck forward once more. 2 steps now. 2 fragile threads tying us together in front of every watching eye. Murmurs swept through the crowd, not laughter this time but something else. Respect, maybe, or disbelief. The handlers exchanged looks, their doubt shaken. The auctioneer rubbed his chin, silent for once. The Colt tossed his head, ears flicking, but he did not rear again. He stood tall, watching me with eyes still wild, yet searching. My chest tightened with something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Behind me, Naomi's voice trembled. You'll never turn back now, will you? I didn't answer, not with words. Instead, I gave the rope another gentle pull, ready for whatever storm still lived in him, knowing the real journey had only just begun. The Colt jerked once more, rope snapping taut, and my arms shook from the strain. A murmur rolled through the men crowding the fence, half expecting me to stumble, half waiting for proof that my win at the auction had been folly. I bent my knees, steadied myself, and let the line slide just enough to remind him it wasn't a trap. He snorted hard, white breath flaring in the heat, then froze, his ears pricked forward as though he was testing the sound of my breath against his own. Naomi's voice quivered behind me. This isn't trust, Caleb. It's stubbornness. He'll tear you apart. She wanted to sound stern, but fear thinned her words. I kept my eyes on the Colt, my tone even. He's testing me, not tearing me. There's a difference. My sister gave a sharp laugh, the kind that hides worry more than scorn, and the crowd caught the edge of it. A few men nodded in agreement with her, others waited, silent as if they too needed to see which of us would break first. Blackwell leaned on the rail, his shadow stretching long across the dust. That animal will never bow, he said with a drawl meant to sting. You'll feed him every coin you've got, and when you've nothing left, he'll still stand wild. His words carried like poison, but the Colt shifted closer, half a step, his nostrils flaring. I felt the rope loosen slightly in my grip and I almost smiled. Then let him stand wild, I murmured. So long as he stands with me. A ripple of unease moved through the watchers. One of the handlers whispered, never seen a Colt pause like that. The other spat into the dirt. Pauses don't mean taming. Their doubt pressed heavy, yet I could feel the thread between us tighten. Not in anger but in fragile recognition. I bent slightly at the waist, lowering my stance so the Colt's wild eyes met mine square. I won't hurt you, I said, steady, plain. His ears twitched, and though he tossed his head once, he didn't lunge again. The auctioneer finally broke his silence, clapping his hands once. Well, gentlemen, looks like Armstrong's bought himself not just a Colt, but a spectacle. Laughter followed, though uneasy, half respectful. I barely heard them. My boots pressed deeper into the dirt, my breath even, my hands firm but gentle. For the first time since the hammer fell, I felt the rope not as a burden but as a bridge. A bridge built on dust, sweat, and the smallest thread of trust that could yet grow into something greater. The Colt pawed the ground, sending dust curling into the air, and the rope quivered like a live wire between us. My hands ached, but I held steady, neither pulling too hard nor letting go. Every movement felt like the edge of a blade. One wrong step and the moment would shatter. Around me the murmurs had faded. Even the children clinging to the fence rails had gone silent, their eyes wide, waiting. The whole yard seemed to breathe with me, shallow and unsure. Naomi's skirts brushed the boards as she stepped closer, her face pale. Caleb, she whispered, softer now, as though even her voice might spook the animal. Please, what if this ends badly? I glanced at her only once. It will end how it needs to, I said, keeping my tone calm, though my chest felt heavy. She pressed her lips together, tears threatening, but she stayed rooted, unwilling to leave me to face this alone. The Colt shifted again, his head tossing, but there was less rage in the motion this time, more confusion. His breath came harsh, yet he didn't bolt. I moved my boot forward an inch, then another, tugging the rope with care. That's it, I murmured. Just one more step. The crowd leaned in, shoulders pressed, hats tilted low, as if drawn into the quiet pull of the scene. The Colt's muscles trembled, and for a moment he froze, caught between fear and choice. Then, with a sudden exhale that rattled his chest, he stepped closer, closing the space between us. A low sound rippled from the watchers, half disbelief, half respect. Blackwell's jaw clenched, his smile gone. "You're playing with fire?" he spat. I finally met his eyes, steady and unshaken. "Better fire than ash." His glare burned, but he said nothing more. I reached out slowly, my fingers hovering just above the rope near the colt's neck. The animal's eyes flicked toward me, wild and watchful, but he did not shy away. My palm hovered there, every nerve in my hand alive with the weight of the moment. Behind me the world held its breath. The colt's ears twitched, and for one fragile heartbeat, it seemed he might allow it, that touch that would seal the first fragile bond. The air was so still that when he stamped once, the echo rang through the corral like thunder. I did not flinch. I only waited, steady as stone, knowing that in patience lay the only chance of trust. The colt's nostrils flared, his breath loud enough for me to feel it against my skin, though I still hadn't touched him. My hand hovered inches from his neck, trembling but firm, while the rope sagged just enough to ease the weight between us. The world around us blurred, the dust, the faces, the low cough of the auctioneer, all of it seemed far off. It was only me and the colt, caught in a silence that carried more power than noise ever could. He tossed his head once, sharp and sudden, and gasps rose from the fence. My boots slid back half a step, dirt grinding beneath my heels, but I didn't let the rope snap tight. I gave him space. His ears flicked, uncertain, his chest still rising and falling in quick bursts. "I'm not here to break you," I whispered, the words slipping out without thought. "I just need you to see me." For a heartbeat, he froze again as if the sound of my voice anchored him where strength could not. From behind, Blackwell scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. "Horses don't listen to words, Armstrong. They bend to force. Always have, always will." His sneer cut through the air, but before I could answer, the colt gave the faintest lean forward, his muzzle brushing against the rope where my fingers rested. It wasn't surrender, not even close, but it was something new, fragile and startling. Naomi covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes wide. "Caleb," she breathed, her tone torn between fear and wonder. Evelyn Parker, who had slipped quietly among the onlookers with her basket, spoke at last, her voice calm but certain. "Not every creature bends to force," she said, her eyes fixed on me and the colt. "Some choose." Her words carried a weight that hushed even the men smirking along the rails. I drew a slow breath, lowering my hand another inch, until at last my fingers brushed the damp warmth of his coat. The contact was fleeting, he jerked back with a loud snort, the rope snapping taut again, but the touch had been real. My heart hammered, my throat thick. I whispered anyway, steady as I could manage. "You felt it too, didn't you, boy?" The colt reared half high, landing with a crack of hooves against the earth, and the spell broke into murmurs and scattered laughter. But I stood straighter, the sting in my palms forgotten. That one fleeting touch was enough to tell me this wasn't the end of the struggle. It was the beginning. The colt circled me in a tight arc, rope stretched between us like a line drawn in dust. His eyes stayed fixed, wild and sharp, yet something in them had shifted, less fury, more watchfulness. Each step rattled the ground, each snort blew hot through the heavy air. My body ached from strain, but I matched him turn for turn, never yanking, never pushing too hard. The crowd followed our movements with their heads, silent as though they watched a dance no one had expected to see. Naomi gripped the fence rail, her knuckles white. "You're pushing him too far," she cried, her voice cracking. "One mistake, Caleb, and he'll kill you." I answered without looking away from the colt. "If I turn back now, I'll never touch him again. He'll know I quit." My words stung her, I knew, but they were true. She pressed her lips together, eyes wet, though she stayed where she was, unable to walk away. Blackwell shifted his weight, arms folded, a smirk creeping back over his face. "You've got pride, Armstrong, but pride doesn't feed a horse. You'll starve him and yourself before winter's through." His voice carried easy, like he wanted every ear to hear it. I kept mine on the colt. "Better to starve with him than fatten under you," I said plain, the rope pulling tight as the animal lunged again. The words brought a low ripple through the crowd, half with me, half against. Then it happened. The colt slowed his circling, hooves dragging deeper lines in the dirt. His ears twitched forward, and with a rough, uncertain step, he closed the gap between us by half. My heart stuttered, but I held steady, loosening the rope a fraction. He blew out a heavy breath, the sound almost weary, and dropped his head just enough that the top of his mane brushed against the line. Gasps rose again, softer this time, filled with disbelief. I whispered low, "Only for him." That's it, boy. That's enough for today. My hand eased down, brushing the coarse hair of his mane for the briefest moment. He jerked back, not in rage but in reflex, then stood, sides heaving, eyes still fixed on me. The crowd stirred, sensing the shift, unsure what to make of it. I knew better than to claim victory. This was no end, only the first thread of a rope not made of hemp but of trust. Behind me, Naomi's voice cracked once more. You've tied your life to him now. I nodded, not turning. Then I'll hold that knot, whatever it costs. The sun had slipped lower, casting long gold beams through the rails, and everything, the dust, the men, even the Colt's breath, looked dipped in fire. My arms trembled, but I stayed planted, the rope no longer a tug of war but a thin line of breath between us. The white Colt pawed the dirt again, not to bolt but to test, like a child pressing a door to see if it will hold. His ears flicked forward, and for the first time he stopped circling. I took one slow step closer, boots crunching softly. My heart thumped so loud I could feel it in my fingertips. Easy, I said low and plain. The Colt's nostrils quivered, his head tilted, unsure. Behind me someone whispered, I'll be damned, but nobody laughed this time. Naomi's hands were pressed flat against her chest. She didn't speak at all. He sniffed at the air between us, then shifted his weight, inching forward. I lowered my hand, not fast, not reaching, just low enough that my fingers brushed the rope near his neck again. He didn't flinch. The crowd leaned forward as one. That's it, I whispered. My thumb brushed his damp coat, a ghost of a touch, and though he jerked his head once, he did not pull away. Blackwell spat into the dirt, his eyes dark as coal. It won't last, he muttered, but his voice lacked its usual certainty. Evelyn Parker's voice rose soft but clear from somewhere near the fence. Sometimes it does, she said, and the words hung there like a small prayer. I let the rope go slack just enough for him to feel free, then stepped back. The Colt blinked, blew a heavy breath, and stood still. Not tamed. Not broken. But still. Around us, the murmurs turned into quiet respect, like church when the hymn ends. I could feel the ache in my palms where the rope had burned, and a strange ache in my chest too, a mix of fear and relief. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time I saw more than a wild creature. I saw a chance, thin and hard-earned, to rebuild something in myself I thought was gone. I whispered it without thinking, we'll figure this out, you and me. And for a heartbeat, the way he flicked his ears forward felt like an answer. Night came down slow, laying shadows across the yard until the corral glowed faint under the lantern Naomi set by the porch. The white Colt paced, restless, his hooves thudding in a rhythm that carried through the boards. I leaned against the rail, my arms sore, my palms raw, yet I could not bring myself to step away. Every toss of his head, every snort, was a reminder of the storm still in him, but also of the thread that had begun to weave between us. Naomi's voice floated through the dark. You should be inside. You've done enough harm for one day. She stood in the doorway, her shawl wrapped tight, her face half lit. I shook my head. If I walk away now, he'll think I gave up. I can't do that. She sighed, the sound weary, and turned back into the house, leaving the light burning like a small anchor in the window. The Colt stopped his pacing for a moment, ears twitching toward me. I lowered my voice. You're not mine to break. You're mine to stand with. That's the truth. He blew out a breath, stamping once, then swung his head as if testing whether my words carried weight. The rope sagged loose along the rail, but I didn't touch it. I only leaned there, steady, waiting. From down the road came the faint rattle of hooves. Figures moved in the dark, riders slowing near the fence line. Their shapes blurred against the night, but their silence spoke louder than any greeting. Even in the dim, I knew who had sent them. Blackwell did not forgive, not even in small things. One rider reined close enough for his horse's breath to stir the dust, then turned away without a word. They lingered only long enough to remind me I was being watched. Then they rode off, leaving the sound of hooves echoing in my chest. The Colt tossed his mane, startled, and pressed against the far side of the corral. I stepped forward, resting both hands on the rail. Easy, boy. They're gone. My voice shook more than I liked, but he stilled after a moment, watching me through the dark. His eyes caught the lantern light, glowing fierce and alive. I stayed there until the night deepened and the stars stretched wide. The Colt stood quiet at last, not tame, not trusting, but less wild than before. I whispered into the cool air, half to him, half to myself, we'll hold on. Tomorrow we'll try again. Morning broke pale and cool, the mist hanging low over the field like a veil. The white Colt was already awake, pacing along the corral rail, his coat damp with dew. I stepped out of the house with a bucket of water and a small bag of oats, my boots sinking into the soft earth. Every muscle in my arms still ached from the day before, but my hands felt steadier. Today would be different, quieter, slower, but it mattered just as much. Naomi stood at the door, her shawl wrapped tight. "You're wasting what little we have," she called softly, though her voice trembled. "We can't afford this, Caleb. Not again." I didn't look back. "He's not a waste," I said, setting the bucket near the gate. "He's a chance." She shook her head but didn't move. The colt snorted at the sound of the bucket hitting the ground, his ears flicking back and forth. I stayed still, arms folded over the top rail, waiting. I didn't rush him. The smell of oats drifted on the cool air, and after a long moment he edged closer, pawing at the dirt. "Easy," I murmured. "Take your time." He snorted again, neck arched, then stretched his nose toward the bucket, wary but tempted. When his lips finally brushed the grain, my breath eased. It was only a small victory, a few mouthfuls stolen between caution and fear, but in the world of taming, the smallest steps mattered most. I didn't move closer, didn't break the fragile thread of trust beginning to form. From the road, Evelyn Parker appeared, her basket swinging lightly at her side. She stopped by the fence, her eyes soft with something like admiration. "He's wild," she said gently, her voice carrying warmth instead of judgment. I nodded without looking away from the colt. "So was I once." The words slipped out before I could stop them. "Surprising even me." Evelyn tilted her head, studying me with eyes that saw more than I wished to share. For a moment, the silence between us was heavier than the mist. The colt chewed slowly, his ears twitching, and though his muscles stayed tense, he didn't retreat. It was enough to keep hope alive. I rested my arms on the rail, feeling the ache in my hands fade into something else, a steady resolve. This was the start of a long road, but for the first time, it felt like a road worth walking. By midday the mist had burned away, leaving the yard sharp with heat. Word had spread faster than dust on the wind. Men from town gathered along the fence, curious to see if the fool from yesterday had managed more than luck. Their boots scraped, their voices buzzed low, some mocking, others doubtful, a few daring to hope. The colt stamped and snorted at the noise, his mane tossing bright in the sun, but his eyes stayed fixed on me. I led him toward the smaller training pen, rope taut between us. Every step rattled my nerves, but I walked steady, my boots leaving a clean trail in the dirt. "He'll buck you flat," one man muttered, loud enough to draw chuckles. Another leaned forward, whispering, "Or maybe he'll kill him trying." I kept my jaw tight, refusing to answer. The colt lunged once, testing me, but I didn't yank him back. I gave slack, then pulled just enough to guide. His muscles rippled with fight, yet he followed, only a few steps, but steps all the same. Among the watchers stood Blackwell, his smirk sharp as a blade. He leaned on the rail, eyes cutting into me. "Break him if you can, Armstrong," he called, his voice dripping with contempt. "But you'll break yourself first." His words rang clear, pressing down heavy, and for a moment doubt clawed at me. My father's voice returned, steady, calm, reminding me patience tamed what fists never could. I breathed deep, steadying my grip. The colt reared, hooves slicing the air. Gasps tore from the crowd. My arms burned as I held, not with brute strength, but with rhythm, guiding, resisting, easing. The pen filled with dust, choking, blinding, but I stayed with him, every movement matched, every lunge answered with balance. Sweat stung my eyes, my shirt clung to my back, yet I did not yield. Then, just as sudden as the storm had risen, something shifted. The colt slowed his lunges, circling me with wary steps instead of tearing against the rope. His ears twitched forward, his breathing heavy but even. A hush swept over the fence line. A boy whispered, "He's choosing." The word struck like truth. My chest tightened, caught between relief and wonder. Blackwell's smirk faltered, his jaw stiffening. He spat into the dirt, though his eyes stayed fixed on the colt with something colder than anger, fear of a bond he could never buy. And in that silence, for the first time, the crowd's doubt bent toward respect. The heat hung heavy, pressing every sound flat against the earth. The colt circled me slow now, no longer in fury but in thought, his hooves dragging soft lines into the dirt. I didn't move fast, didn't chase. I stood steady, rope loose in my hands, giving him room to test the air between us. The watchers clung to the rail, quiet as stones. Even the auctioneer, who had thrived on noise and bets, had gone still, his grin thin and uncertain. Naomi's voice rose at last, trembling but strong. "You've proven your point, Caleb. Stop before it costs us more than we have." Her plea carried through the silence like a prayer. I met her eyes only briefly, then turned back to the colt. "It's not about proving anything," I said plain and low. It's about keeping what's worth keeping. The colt stopped, planted his hooves firm and blew out a long hard breath. His ears turned forward, his head dipped slightly, and I felt the rope slacken between us. I took a single step closer, careful, steady. My fingers hovered above the coarse hair along his neck, waiting. For a breathless moment he didn't shy away. The warmth of his coat brushed my hand, and the world seemed to hold itself still. Gasps rustled through the crowd, but no one spoke loud. It was the kind of hush that felt holy, as if breaking it would undo the fragile bond. My chest swelled tight, my heart thudding in my throat. I whispered, "That's it, boy. You see me now." He jerked once, quick testing, but didn't bolt. He stood, sides heaving, eyes locked on mine. From the rail, Blackwell's voice slashed the quiet. "He'll never carry you, Armstrong. All you've bought is trouble." His words dripped with venom, but I didn't look his way. I stroked the colt's neck once more, letting him feel my touch, gentle but firm. His skin shivered under my fingers, yet he stayed. Evelyn Parker, who had watched in silence, finally spoke. "Sometimes trouble is the only thing that teaches us who we are." Her words rang soft, but they cut sharper than Blackwell's spite. The crowd shifted, their whispers turning from doubt to something else, belief. I stepped back slow, letting the rope hang loose. The colt lowered his head further, as though weighing me, and for the first time he did not pull away. It wasn't victory, not yet. It was something smaller but deeper, a fragile truce. And in that truce I felt the first true seed of hope take root. Evening settled like a blanket, the last of the sun sinking low and painting the corral in long shadows. The colt stood calmer now, sweat dried to a dull sheen along his coat, his breath steady though his eyes still watched every move I made. I leaned against the fence, rope slack in my hand, and for the first time since the bidding, I allowed myself to breathe easy. Naomi came to the rail, her face weary. "It isn't over, Caleb," she said quietly. "You've won the moment, but Blackwell won't let this lie." I nodded, my gaze still on the colt. "I know. But I'd rather fight for him than bow to that man's hand." She pressed her lips tight, her silence heavier than her words. Evelyn lingered nearby, basket set down by her feet. She studied the colt, then me, her eyes softer than the crowd's. "They'll talk about this," she murmured. "Some will say you're a fool. Some will say you're stubborn. But I think you've shown them something different." I tilted my head, curious despite myself. "And what's that?" Her lips curved, though it wasn't quite a smile. "That trust can't be bought, only earned. People forget that." The colt shifted closer, his flank brushing the rope as though testing the space. I held my ground, my hand low, steady. He didn't flinch this time, didn't toss his head. He simply stood, the fire in him tempered by something faint but new, curiosity. My chest tightened with the weight of it, a fragile bond beginning to grow. From beyond the corral, hoofbeats echoed faint on the road. Riders slowed near the fence line, their silhouettes dark against the fading light. They didn't speak, didn't stop, just lingered long enough to make their message clear. Blackwell's reach hadn't ended at the auction yard. He meant to remind me that every step forward would be watched. The colt snorted, restless, sensing the unease. I stroked his neck once, whispering, "Easy, boy. Let them watch. We'll hold steady." The riders vanished into the dusk, leaving dust and silence behind. I looked at the colt, still wild, still proud, but standing beside me now, not against me. Naomi turned away, whispering something I couldn't catch. Evelyn picked up her basket, her eyes lingering one last time before she left. Alone with the colt, I felt the weight of choice settle in me. This wasn't about a horse anymore. It was about dignity, about standing against what tried to break us. And for the first time in years I felt whole enough to carry it. The night passed restless, every creak of the barn and shuffle of hooves pulling me from sleep. Before dawn I stepped out into the cool air, lantern in hand. The colt paced near the corral gate, his mane damp with dew, eyes catching the weak light like embers that refused to die. My boots sank into the wet earth as I carried a bucket of water toward him. He tossed his head at the clank of metal, nostrils flaring, but he didn't bolt. I set the bucket down slow, the water sloshing soft, and leaned against the rail. "You're still here?" I whispered. "And so am I." The colt pawed once, then stilled, his gaze fixed on me. I didn't move closer. I waited, letting the quiet settle between us. Naomi came out, her arms folded tight against the morning chill. "They say Blackwell's been asking after you in town," she said, her voice trembling. "People think he means to make an example." I met her eyes, the weight of her fear pressing into me. "Let him ask," I answered. "I'll be here and so will he." She shook her head, but she saw the set of my jaw and knew I wouldn't bend. As the sun climbed, Evelyn arrived, her steps quick, her face pale. She gripped the fence with both hands, her voice urgent. "Caleb, I overheard men at the saloon. Blackwell's planning something, tonight. He means to hurt you, maybe worse. You can't stay here." My stomach tightened, but I didn't let my face show it. If I run, he wins. If I fight, at least it's on my land. Her eyes brimmed, anger and worry tangled together. "You're stubborn enough to die for pride." I glanced at the Colt, who stamped the earth, ears pricked. "Not for pride," I said softly. "For what's right." The crowd from yesterday had drifted away, but whispers would bring some of them back when the storm broke. I looked at the Colt, his breath sharp, his stance proud, and felt the rope in my hand is more than hemp. It was a vow. I tightened my grip and spoke low into the rising day, words meant only for him. "Tonight we stand, you and me." The Colt lifted his head, blowing a hard breath into the morning air. And in that sound, wild and fierce, I heard not just defiance but a promise, thin, unspoken, but real. Dusk crept in slow, the sky bleeding red at the edges, the kind of red that promised more than just nightfall. I had spent the day setting tools aside, checking the barn door latch twice, moving Naomi's few belongings deeper into the house. She tried to keep busy, but her hands trembled with every task. At last she stopped me on the porch, her voice sharp with fear. "Caleb, listen to reason. You can't face them. You're one man. He has men, money, power." I shook my head, my eyes fixed on the corral where the Colt shifted restlessly. "I'm not standing for me. I'm standing for him, and for us. If I bend now, he owns more than the horse. He owns our name." Naomi pressed her lips together, tears bright in her eyes, and said no more. Evelyn arrived just as the sun dropped behind the ridge, her shawl pulled tight, her steps quick. "I'm staying," she said before I could protest. "You don't have to do this alone." Her voice wavered, but her eyes held firm. I gave a small nod. Words felt useless against the weight of what was coming. The Colt tossed his head, rope quivering as though he sensed the storm before we heard it. Then it came, the distant thunder of hooves growing louder, carrying laughter sharp enough to slice through the dusk. Blackwell's men crested the ridge, dark shapes against the fading sky. They spread out as they neared, rifles slung over their shoulders, their silence heavy with intent. Blackwell dismounted slow, his boots grinding into the dirt, his eyes glinting mean under the brim of his hat. "Step aside, Armstrong," he called, voice thick with arrogance. "That Colt was mine the moment he entered the pen. You've been borrowing him against time you don't have." His words hung like a noose in the air. I stood by the corral, one hand steady on the rope. The Colt snorted, pawing the ground as if he shared my resolve. My chest rose with a slow breath. "You had your chance at the block," I said, voice calm but iron. "You lost it. He's mine now, and no coin of yours will change it." The men shifted in their saddles, uneasy in the tense quiet. Blackwell's smirk stretched thin. "Then you've chosen your end." He stepped closer, hand brushing the edge of his coat, but the Colt reared suddenly, hooves flashing high, his cry splitting the night. The rider's horses sidestepped, nervous, breaking the rhythm of Blackwell's advance. I held the rope firm, voice steady through the storm. "You'll have to take him over my dead body." And in that moment, the night held its breath, waiting to see whose will would break first. The night hung thick and the ridge kept its silence until the first of the town men stepped forward. They did not ride in with raised hands or loud threats. They came slowly, boots crunching on the road, faces lit by lanterns and worry. Old Mr. Hayes, who ran the feed store, walked up beside Blackwell and spoke low enough for only those nearest to hear. "There's more to a man than what he buys," he said, and the words moved through the circle like water finding cracks. Blackwell bristled, but he did not strike or shout. For a moment, nobody did anything but breathe. I held the rope tight, my knuckles white, feeling the Colt's pulse steady beneath my palm. The animal stamped, restless, but he did not rear. The mood shifted as neighbors edged closer, not to push or to menace, but to stand as witnesses. Evelyn stood among them, lantern held high, and she made eye contact with Naomi. Naomi's hand found mine and squeezed it hard, the pressure steadying something inside me I had thought broken. Blackwell tried pressure softer than a shove, words, small jabs, cruel reminders of debts and hunger. "You think the town will feed such foolishness?" he said, voice low, hoping to sway the crowd. But the men around him remembered favors, loans, and times when Caleb had helped them without asking. One by one they spoke up, not for drama but for truth. "He saved my mare in the spring," Mr. Hayes said. "He shared seed when ours failed. Another man nodded. He's never asked for pay. Their voices formed a chorus and Blackwell's certainty thinned like morning mist. When Blackwell saw the faces around him, something in him wavered. He had built fear from coin and loud talk, but he had not built the kind of respect that came from a life of quiet help. He shifted, then spat, then said something bitter, but the taste of his words had less power now. He mounted slowly, his men following with shoulders tight, not eager. They rode away with dust at their heels and no cheers behind them, only the steady footsteps of a town that had chosen its side. After they left, the corral felt different, less like a stage and more like a place where change could begin. The Colt nosed the rope, then lowered his head, as if acknowledging that the battle had been decided by more than hands and money. Naomi let out a breath she had kept since dawn, and for the first time she allowed a small, tired smile. Evelyn stepped close and spoke softly, "You didn't do it for show." I glanced at her, and her eyes said what words did not, that what I had done mattered beyond the price. The crowd dispersed in slow groups, heads down, whispering about what they had seen. No one shouted. No one jeered. The night only held a quiet that felt like permission. As we led the Colt back toward the barn, a child from the fence ran ahead, laughing, and the Colt's ears pricked at the sound. He followed, a step behind our pace, not wild now but watchful, curious. I felt the rope slacken in my hand as we crossed the yard. The day had not solved everything, Blackwell's shadow might return, but something stronger had started. A bond, fragile and real, tied not by coin but by choosing to stand. Moral lesson. True strength is not shown by breaking what is wild but by guiding it with patience and respect. Caleb's choice to stand firm reminded everyone that dignity cannot be bought and trust cannot be forced, it must be earned. In life, whether with people or creatures, the bonds built on respect will outlast fear, money, or pride.